It's the middle of May, and for the last 14 years on the channel, we've had around this time the rumblings of another Call of Duty title. Some announcements coming sooner, some coming later, with some in recent years even being months away still by this point in the year. That likely won't be the case with Modern Warfare 4, and while we haven't covered a Call of Duty title in a little while here on the channel, there's one element in particular with Modern Warfare 4 that, although the rest of my interest isn't as peaked as it used to be with the annual releases, one element still does have my attention: DMZ. Today, I want to take some time to discuss the project as a whole, what we've heard, and what this could be for not only the extraction genre, but the franchise as a whole. So drop your thoughts, drop a like, and make sure to subscribe to stay updated with all things FPS content, perhaps even more Modern Warfare 4 and DMZ, pending my own personal feelings for what we see in the future. Finally, check out my friends over at Advanced GG. We've recently launched some cool co-branded stuff, including a flavor I'd highly recommend. Code Espresso can get 10% off your entire order, but anyways, let's get into it. So DMZ. For those who may not be aware, it was Modern Warfare 2 2022's attempt at an extraction shooter. I remember talking to some developers back in the day about it, how they had been avid fans of Tarkov, saw where the industry could be going, and wanted to take a stab at their own version of it. Personally, I still think they did a rather solid job with it when you consider the packaging of Call of Duty. Call of Duty has never been that hard to enter in the space. It's never been about becoming a hardcore, niche experience, but at the time, extraction shooters, while still blossoming to be more widely accepted, were for the most part just that: hardcore and niche. So how do you package something like that in a Call of Duty title? It feels almost incompatible, right? Well, personally, amidst everything that Modern Warfare 2 did, surrounded by controversy in gameplay decisions with multiplayer and Warzone, at the time, slow, sluggish movement, slower to draw weapons, more tactical feeling, louder footsteps to deduce where enemies were, it kind of fit the mold of what an extraction genre game was at the time. So while not nearly as hardcore as others, it was the most methodically paced of all Call of Duty titles in the franchise that I don't think would have worked nearly as well with other games. And while to this day I still think that Warzone and multiplayer should have been more arcade-based, I think that it worked well for DMZ. Personally speaking, I thought that DMZ had caught a bit of fire, but the problem I'd say was two things. Early entry, again, extraction shooters were relatively niche at that point, that there weren't too many making massive names for themselves, even though there were a bunch in the market, and I think that partially contributed to an early demise of the mode, or probably what is likely a number two of a harder to sell vision of, and of course when it comes to corporate business, a lack of return on investment and profit potential. As for the early adoption, at the time, Call of Duty was the biggest name to throw support behind the genre. We had established Tarkov, we had games like Hunt Showdown, and plenty of other smaller caliber ones out there, but the name Call of Duty, an industry titan taking on this type of mode, was something that was certainly the biggest to date. The goal, create a mode that engaged the gameplay loop of extraction shooters, but with a Call of Duty formula. Whether they did that or not, of course, is up to you, but from the jump, I think they did pretty well in supporting DMZ. COD is the McDonald's of shooters. DMZ was the fries everyone could recognize, the fountain Sprite soda, something easily recognizable that you associate with it, digestible on any real palate that if you wanted to pick it up as a first-time player or a vet, you could. Early on, the support seemed to be great. We had a ton of missions up front, the world of Al Mazrah to interact with. We had Building 21 introduced shortly after the launch. We had Koshi Complex introduced a season or two later. And then, after that, we had kind of a bit of downtime. Seasonal updates started dropping more and more support each go-around until we got to Season 4, where that actually offered a relatively entire overhaul to many of the systems in play. An overhaul that introduced a ton of new features and user experiences that actually brought this into something that could have been something that flourished long-term. But then, that was it. It wasn't until the Al Mazrah night modes in Season 6 that we'd see anything mentioned or touched in DMZ once again, and even after that, we didn't see anything in relation to an update until recently, where they did end up correcting server issues for the game, fixing crashing issues that would be happening that for those that would still be playing DMZ in 2026, they'd end up encountering that just about every game, which obviously is a big problem in a permadeath mode where you lose your gear anytime you try to play and die. So what could have easily been supported and continued as the next big thing in the extraction genre being something that's easily accessible to all players, it kind of fizzled out to having zero support. So were they too early that it didn't quite catch on? Possibly, but a lack of potential profit was ultimately what may have done in the game. With a scale of games such as Call of Duty, no matter how much you want to have this sort of asking for the game to be built on fans, with fans in mind, without predatory elements for monetization, all these gameplay changes that could have been made and argued over the last couple of years to hopefully turn the ship around, everything is always going to come back to monetization in today's day and age. So the prospect of monetizing DMZ was something that became a real problem behind the scenes likely, because how do you do that without about making pay-to-win elements in the game mode, and in many instances, there even were real arguments to be made that they did cross that line, i.e. operator packs that ended up including UAVs upon spawn, or a self-revive upon spawn, things like that that gave genuine gameplay benefits for a character that was purchased via the shop. So without a steady revenue stream to directly support the further development and the reason to keep the project going, it likely contributed to the eventual downfall of it and eventual lack of support. But here's the thing. Extractions have gained a lot of ground in that near 4 years since the launch of Modern Warfare 2 with DMZ, that the further mention of mainstream or approachable by definition being applicable to other games out there. I think the one most notably that we've covered here on the channel, mostly in the last 6 months, is Arc Raiders. While I love the game and it sounds like I'm ragging on it a little bit, I don't mean it in that way at all. Arc Raiders is a very simple extraction shooter. Minimal, hardcore depth beyond light, medium, heavy designations of things like ammo and shields, matchmaking systems that allow you to choose how you want to play, simple yet in-depth grinds, yet not in-depth enough to make people feel like it's unobtainable each season over season, to keep redoing these things every single reset and wipe, and all of that while on a $40 price tag, something that in today's industry standards was a huge relief. How many mainstream games are there out there that you've picked up or seen for $40 that can give you 500 hours easy of playtime, making that well worth the $40? Arc Raiders is the most recent example of making the extraction genre approachable. It's why we saw such a massive peak with the game's launch, and a relatively unrealistic peak at that that's always considered such a fall off when people look at the player numbers and that argument here today. It hit astronomical heights for the genre, a genre which is usually much more closed off and representative of numbers way lower than what we see today even. So with the social elements of the game mixed with the approachable nature, I think that most publishers watched that this past fall and were like, dang, we could have had that. And when Call of Duty did have something similar to that in a much more simplistic view years prior, a second stab at that with a heavier investment certainly makes sense to me. Now that said, DMZ 2.0 has been a leak and rumor for quite some time now. Going on, I would want to say probably 2 years now at this point since we first heard about it. I'd have to track down the actual date on that, but off the top of my head, it's been out there for a long time. Now, previously, we've heard a lot of things about what's upcoming for DMZ 2.0 this year. Things like PvPvE or PvE having an option for both. Things like it being the third paid mode. Things like how we have zombies or spec ops in prior games as the third main pillar versus it being free to play. There were a lot of gameplay things that were rumored and leaked from a long time ago, that DMZ wouldn't be associated with Warzone, but it would instead be its own thing in its own separate capacity, with newly enhanced AI to be introduced, 12 to 16 teams of 3 each match, designated maps for DMZ in particular, major updates every 2 seasons with smaller updates every season and mid-season, 4 maps and a headquarters at launch, DMZ being separate from Warzone and multiplayer, being its own sort of truncated version of the game, events occurring during the matches that are crucial to survival, and again, potentially a PvE versus PvPvE mode. DMZ apparently would have a POI difficulty level labeled Extreme, which is a 4th tier above the 3 that we saw in DMZ 1.0, that the mode would end up having weather cycles of default, fog, rain and heavy rain, snow and heavy snow, as well as wind, seeing these major map modifiers that we see in other existing games currently. We heard that there would be other ways to infill into DMZ, like a ground vehicle, helicopter, AC-130, or a standard infill sequence. We saw that DMZ was referred to as DMZ2 in the files, and it would have its own unique walking operator front-end scene that would indicate its own separate standalone mode, similar to how we have zombies, how we have Endgame, how we have Warzone, how we have multiplayer, campaign, its own separate thing there. And it was also said that DMZ will have a 3D printer of some sort, which isn't much to go off of, but the possibilities of that introduce a lot of cool gameplay features that we could see with this, dealing with some of the contraband that we saw perhaps within the DMZ 1.0. Now, recent leaks, there was mention that there would be a new iteration of DMZ, seemingly borrowing elements from Modern Warfare Zombies and Endgame, and according to known leaker Relax, that they'd end up having a PvP-focused map of some kind, which is an interesting start when we think about recent leaks here at this, because Modern Warfare Zombies and Endgame do have some elements that you might be able to pick up on immediately. Things like, I don't know, maybe PvE, We'll come back to that one though, because that is a mention that's specifically expanded upon in a little bit. Objectives and missions to complete were both in Modern Warfare Zombies and Endgame. Hot zones with more enemy AI or tougher AI. Random spawns. In-world upgrades like Pack-a-Punch or character upgrades in Endgame. In-world events, more so being an Endgame, but you get what I mean. So there's a lot of things that you could potentially pick and choose from here that would be compounding on this, from DMZ, which then ended up being Modern Warfare Zombies, the rework of that, into then Endgame was picked up on, revives from that for Black Ops 7, that then leads into potentially DMZ 2.0. The last 4 years just kind of compounding on and playing around with things all upon each other. The mention of a PvP-focused map is an interesting touch because, as we'll mention explicitly in a second, it doesn't mean that that's the only way we'll be able to PvP, but it's more so likely a sort of gear slaughterfest type of map. Something like Building 21 was meant to be in DMZ. Something like Stella leans in Arc. Something like Cryo in Marathon. Something like Labs in Tarkov, and more. Each of these games ends up having a more condensed map that forces more player engagements, and that's what it's likely referring to. And then the other thing that was mentioned by Alex here is that there is apparently no PvE mode only planned for this. And this is a big debate in these modes today. The biggest being, I would say, Arc and Marathon in the AAA space, where Arc refuses but offers matchmaking capabilities to let you basically choose to play PvE with the threat of enemy raiders, even in the most safest of lobbies, while it was just announced that Marathon will actually be adding a PvE mode in the middle of its next season. But to have no dedicated PvE, that reception I think is based upon what you want out of the gameplay experience and how you feel personally. Inherently, the extraction genre was founded on and leans PvPvE. Purely PvE deviates into some like looter shooter style and genre, but it really is all player preference. So ultimately, there's a lot that could be expanded upon here given what we see in relation to recent successes over the last couple of years since DMZ and Modern Warfare 2. There's a lot that seems to be built out, and I'd be very curious to see what comes of this. Ultimately, I still think we're likely a ways away from seeing what DMZ has to offer. Like, I'd say the upcoming reveal for Modern Warfare 4, if that does indeed become the name, is likely going to happen within the next 2 to 3 weeks here, given historical sort of relevance and the pattern set with each individual marketing window. That likely will be something that showcases the narrative world, campaign, maybe some multiplayer, but that's also unlikely. But DMZ, I wouldn't expect to be revealed until at least, I would say, the multiplayer reveal in the late summer with COD Next. But I still think that that could probably even be held until after that point. Personally speaking though, DMZ is what's piqued my interest the most as of recently. Been really into extraction shooters, obviously Arc, we've been doing a ton of stuff here with the game on the channel, so very interested to see where this goes, given again what the market has done in the last couple of years since DMZ 1.0, what could be piggybacked off of from market successes, some of the matchmaking, perhaps some of the social elements of Arc Raiders, and other things like that. We'll have to wait and see, but I want to share this with you guys today, start a conversation, start a dialogue, see where we go with Modern Warfare 4 as a sort of game here on the channel. Like I said, we covered Call of Duty for 13, 14 years here on the channel, that it feels weird to not be as interested in the whole of the product, but more so some elements here and there. Campaign and DMZ, definitely looking forward to seeing what they present with that. Multiplayer, I mean, it's just all kind of been the same to me the last couple of years, personally speaking, that it hasn't piqued my interest as much, but I mean, hey, we'll see where this goes. I am interested, as always, in following along with game launches like this, so let me know your thoughts down below. What are you guys hoping to see with Modern Warfare 4 or DMZ in particular? Drop your thoughts, but if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so it's a single thing regarding all things DMZ 2.0, Arc Raiders, and even more FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine's been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.